contest. And the contest was to discover the best pet owner look-alike. Okay? And I've got 6 of the photos from that contest. Okay? And so we're going to look through all of them. Okay? And then I want you to clap on the one you think is the closest look. Okay? Alright, so here it is. Pet owner look-alike contest. Number 1. Certainly looks good in that situation, doesn't it? Okay. Number 1. Number 2. Pet owner look-alike. Alright. Now, you know, this picture's scary because that reminds me a little bit of my son-in-law, Brad. Which one? They don't have a look. They don't look like he doesn't look like that. Okay. Now, you know, in that one, that dog needs to have a cup too. Maybe okay. Number 6. All right. Okay. See them all. Okay. Okay. So I want you to clap, voting for them. Okay. You think that's the best pet look-alike contest picture? Clap your hands. Think that's the best. Think that's the best. Clap your hands. Think that's the best. Clap your hands. Think that's the best. Clap your hands. All right. So that's the winner right there. All right. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right. Well, the reason we do that is because this morning the one that we're going to look at is the idea of, anybody know? Reverent wonder. Reverent wonder. And reflecting the heart of God. A lot of synonyms we could use that. We could use the synonym Christ-likeness. We could use the synonym holiness to describe this. We could use the synonym godliness. And that's what I'll do a lot to the message this morning in referring to this. But it is reverent wonder. And so we're going to consider what does that mean and how are we to add that to our faith? What is God looking at in us to glorify Him? So our text, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith." Our New Year's resolution is good character, spiritual understanding, alert discipline, passionate patience, reverent wonder, warm friendliness, and generous love. Okay, so let's start from the top. The first one that we're going to add to our faith is good character. And here's what that means. When we come to faith in Jesus Christ, it means, number 1, looking at our character and changing things. God doesn't let liars, and so we get rid of that in our life. He doesn't let partiers, and so we get rid of those things out of our lives. Those obvious things that destroy our character in front of others, we get rid of those things and have a good character. We add to that, number 2, spiritual understanding. Okay, very good. In other words, as we grow in the faith of Jesus Christ, we begin to add our knowledge through God's Word of what He wants us to do. Spiritual understanding, growing into Him. And then we add to spiritual understanding. You know, let me tell you something. Okay, just a comparison here. I mean, not to scare you, but the first service has done much better than you are. Okay? And there's fewer people in the first service. Okay? So the number 3 is we're going to grow in alert discipline. Okay, very good. Okay. We are disciplining ourselves when we read God's Word. God tells us to do some things, and so we start disciplining ourselves in doing those things. Worshiping Him, reading His Word, praying to Him. Those things that He tells us in the Word, we begin making a practice for our lives, and we have to discipline ourselves to do those things. Okay? And then we add to that passionate patience. Very fresh in your minds, since we did that last week. Okay? We learned that here as we go through life. You know, our tendency is to want to be rewarded all the time. And we're not always rewarded in living out our lives for God. And so He tells us, I want you to be passionate about patience. Trust me that I'm working in your life. And today we're going to do what? Reverent wonder. Okay, we're looking at godliness. Now, I want you to notice something. Is that when we begin working on the discipline in our lives and patience in our lives, I want you to notice something. That those characteristics are good in anything you do. If you're in the sports world, do you need discipline? Do you need patience? If you're in the work world, do you need discipline? Do you need patience? If you're in the academic world, do you need discipline? Do you need patience? I mean, wherever you go, you need those things in our life. And here's what's interesting. It's very easy for us to begin working on those things and start patting ourselves on the back, thinking, look what a good boy I am. And spiritual or reverent wonder brings us back to the understanding that it's God. And I'm living for God. And to that then, so this becomes our connection with the heavenly, with the eternal. The things that I do, I'm doing because of God and connected to Him. And then we branch out in our lives, and the next one we're going to learn next Sunday is warm. Friendliness, very good. Okay, well, that means, and the week after that, we're going to learn generous love. Very good. Okay, good closing, good ending there. Okay, well finished. Okay, so we're going to look at all of these things. So this morning we're going to be looking at this idea of reverent wonder in our lives. And to kind of help us do that, I'm going to share a Bible story. Matthew chapter 21, Jesus tells a parable. And it's just called to us the parable of tenants. And it's the parable about a landowner who buys a piece of land. He puts walls in it, he puts a garden in it, he puts a tower in it. And then he says, hey, I need some tenants to take care of this while I am gone. And I'm going to send the servants, after the end of the year, to come and, take whatever payments, whatever fruit you made, I get a part of that. And the tenant said, great, and so he takes off. And at the end of the year, he sends his servant. And his servant comes and says, you know what, we don't like this guy. He didn't have anything to do with this. And so they beat him up and send him back. Remember that? And so the master sends another servant and says, well, maybe they just didn't get the message, And so another servant comes and they do the same thing to them. They beat him up, treat him bad, send him back with nothing. And so finally the master says, well, maybe if I send my son, they'll understand. I mean business. And so they send the son. You remember they roughed the son up and they killed him. And then Jesus says, what will the master do to those servants? You know what they would do, and I know what they would do. In other words, Jesus is giving us a demonstration of what ungodly servants are like. So my question to you is, let's change that parable a little bit. What would godly servants be like? What would servants be like? The master does the same thing. He buys the land, he puts the vineyard on it, he puts the walls around the vineyard, and he puts a tower in it. And so then he hires godly servants to take care of it. Well, I tell you what they do. If they are godly, they're going to do exactly what the master would do if he was in that garden, right? So they're going to water it, they're going to make sure all the weeds are out of it. Anytime they see a plant that's starting to have problems, they'll treat it, fertilize, whatever they need to do to make it productive. They'll harvest the fruit at the proper time, take good care of the fruit, sell it for a good price, a decent price, and then render unto the master that which is due. All with a focus upon, we're doing this for the master. And that's what godliness is. Or maybe we could do it a little different way. A little girl was sitting in the church and she was hearing the preacher's sermon. The preacher was talking about God. And so on her way home, she has a discussion with her mom. And so she says to her mom, I understand the preacher this morning saying that God is bigger than we are. Is that true? And the mom said, yes, that's true. It's exactly how God is. He's bigger than we are, honey. And so she says, but the preacher also said that God is in us. Is that true, Mom? And so the mom said, yeah, honey, that's exactly true. And so this little girl in her mind puts it all together and says, Mom, if God is in us and He is bigger than we are, then shouldn't He show through? She had it, didn't she? That's exactly what godliness is. It is God shining through our lives. So let's look at a couple things. Number one, in this area of godliness, Peter is telling us that we need to do it, and Paul reminds us in 1 Timothy that we are to do it as well. He tells us that we are to train ourselves to be godly. He's writing Timothy in chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. Here's what he says. Train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is an interesting verse, especially when we break it down and look at the original language. That word train is the word we get our word gymnasium from. Okay? And so you know what a gymnasium is all about. That's where we go and work out, train, try to get better, run faster, develop our muscles and all of those kinds of things. And so that's what Paul is writing to Timothy, and he's reminding us about that we need to work out being godly. We need to be lifting the weights, training ourselves, developing our godly muscles that God has given to us. Does that make sense to you? Train yourself. Work at it is what he's doing. And what's interesting is, as Paul is writing this, he is writing to Timothy in the midst of a situation of the Greek games and all those kinds of things. Okay? Where Timothy has people all around him who are working out, going to do their daily stuff, in the gymnasium, and they're doing that. He says, that profits them physically. But he says, godliness will profit us in this life